I want you to think about the worst thing your child has ever done to you. The time they lied about a broken vase, or maybe the time they crashed the car. You forgave it, right? Because that's what mothers do. We're the ultimate human shock absorbers, built to take a hit, absorb the damage, and then, miraculously, keep standing. But what happens when the hit is a complete, calculated annihilation of your existence? When the man you raised, the one you gave your life savings and your very identity to, decides that the easiest way to finally break free from you is to fake his own death? My name is Alara. I'm 65 years old. Or maybe I should say, I was Alara. The woman I was before this whole nightmare, she's gone now. She was soft, she was a giver, and she was frankly foolishly blind. My son, Victor, was 40, a brilliant mind, charming smile, and a bottomless pit of need. For 2 decades, I had been his unofficial accountant, his banker, his co-signer, his life raft. He and his wife, Serena, lived in a condo I helped purchase, not just the down payment, the bulk of it. Every financial hurdle, every amazing business prospect that needed seed money, every designer purchase Serena absolutely had to have, it all came back to me. I justified it. I was a widow. My late husband, Robert, left me well off. What else was I going to do with the money? It was for my son's happiness. It was for my grandchildren's future. It was my only way of being needed. And in my heart, that feeling of being needed outweighed the constant, dull ache of being used. The last conversation I had with Victor, the real last conversation, not the staged one, was about money, of course. "Mom, the venture capital meeting is next week," he said, his voice smooth and eager, that special cadence he only used when his hand was out. "I just need $50,000 for the final presentation package. It's the last time, I swear. We'll be set for life." I was sitting in my kitchen, staring at my bank statement. My liquid assets were running dangerously low. This was the 6th last time in the last 2 years. "Victor, I don't know if I can do this. The reserves are drying up. I'll have nothing left." He laughed, a quick, nervous puff of air. "Mom, you're being dramatic. You have plenty. What are you going to do, live another 100 years? This investment will pay for 10 of your retirements. Just do the transfer. I'll come by for dinner tomorrow." He hung up without waiting for an answer. I sat there, the weight of his dismissal settling on me like wet cement. I didn't send the money that day. I just couldn't. That small refusal, that single moment of hesitation on my part, was apparently the trigger. The following Tuesday, I was pruning my roses, a completely normal, quiet morning, when the doorbell rang. It was 2 police officers. Not kind neighborhood police, but 2 grim, severe-looking detectives. I remember thinking, Victor must have crashed the car, or maybe Serena maxed out a credit card I co-signed on. "Mrs. Alara Richter?" one of them asked, holding a notepad. "Yes." "We are deeply sorry to inform you that a body was recovered yesterday off the coast of Tulum, Mexico. After cross-referencing fingerprints and dental records, we have positively identified the deceased as your son, Victor Richter." The words didn't sink in. They just bounced off a protective, invisible wall in my mind. Tulum? But he was supposed to be at a business meeting in Seattle, I said, the roses in my hand suddenly feeling ridiculously heavy. The detective just shook his head slowly. "Mrs. Rector, it appears Mr. Rector was on a private fishing trip that took a tragic turn. His charter boat was found capsized. We have notified his wife, Serena." They left me with a small laminated police report and a phone number for the liaison. I stood there, motionless, the red roses falling slowly to the ground around my feet. Victor was dead. My son was gone. the shock, the sudden violent erasure of the one person I had defined my life around, was an agony that defied description. It wasn't just grief. It was the crushing terror of realizing that the central pillar of my existence had been yanked out, and now my entire world was collapsing inward. The days that followed were a blur of tears, casseroles from neighbors, and the surreal task of planning a funeral for a man whose last words to me were a demand for money. Serena was oddly composed. In fact, she was too composed. When I rushed to her condo, the one I paid for, she was already on the phone, not crying, but coordinating logistics with a chilly, businesslike tone. "Ilara, thank you for coming," she said, setting her phone down. "I've already made a few calls. Since the body was recovered in Mexico, the transfer back here is going to be incredibly costly. We should hold a private ceremony for his associates first, then a public service. I've started a GoFundMe for the repatriation and funeral expenses. I figured since you're Victor's mother, you'll handle the rest of the costs." The way she said, "the rest of the costs," it was like she was ordering a latte. My son had just died, and she was already talking about the costs and a GoFundMe while pointing the rest of the bills straight at my wallet. My own grief was raw, debilitating. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I spent hours staring at old photos of Victor as a boy. My heart was truly, genuinely broken. And yet this cold, clinical demand from Serena managed to cut through the fog of my pain, injecting a small, toxic dose of suspicion. "Serena," I asked, my voice hoarse, "did Victor mention anything about a trip to Tulum? He told me Seattle." She rolled her eyes slightly, a flicker of impatience crossing her face. "Ilara, he was an entrepreneur. He had things brewing all the time. Seattle, Tulum, does it matter? He's gone. Now, about the casket. The cheapest one is about $12,000, but I think Victor would want something more dignified, something in mahogany." Mahogany. The man who drove me to the brink of financial ruin was now, in his supposed death, was still trying to bankrupt me for a box he wouldn't even be in. Because the body was recovered in a state that made it impossible to transport in time for a viewing, they would only be able to ship the ashes or hold a service with a closed casket that only contained symbolic items. Serena insisted on the empty casket. I paid for the mahogany coffin. I paid for the lavish wake. I paid for the beautiful stone and the expensive cemetery plot. It was my final, anguished act of maternal devotion. The total came to just over $60,000. I wrote the check with a hand that shook from exhaustion, grief, and a sense of absolute finality. I was burying my son. I was also burying my savings. The funeral itself was a farce. Serena cried on cue, a delicate, photogenic sorrow. Victor's business partner spoke of his unmatched vision. I tried to speak, but the words choked in my throat. I just kept thinking, my beautiful boy is gone, and this woman is already performing for the creditors. But then, an oddity. During the wake, I reached out to touch the suit Victor's family portrait was wearing. It was his favorite, a sharp, custom-made navy. As I touched the photo frame, I noticed a small detail on the glass table next to the memorial. A brand new silver watch, not Victor's usual timepiece. This was a gift I had given him on his 30th birthday, a heavy, German-made chronograph. He never took it off. It was the one piece of jewelry he treasured. I picked it up. "Serena, why is Victor's watch here?" She didn't miss a beat. "Oh, that? He left it in his gym bag. I keep forgetting to put it away." "He wore this everywhere," I said, looking at the watch. It was a distinctive model, heavy. The clasp had a unique etching from the jeweler. "Well, he didn't wear it on the boat, Ilara. Why are you focusing on a silly watch? We have people to thank."
She snatched the watch and dropped it into a velvet-lined box of mementos. The incident was small, yet it planted a seed of doubt that was far more insidious than my initial financial suspicion. A man who treasures a watch doesn't go on an ocean trip without it. A man who treasures a watch doesn't leave it in a gym bag that Serena just happened to find. 2 weeks after the burial, the fake, mahogany, empty casket burial, Serena was gone. She sold the condo in a lightning-fast transaction, took all the furniture, and left me a note. Moving back east, too many memories. Thank you for everything. Thank you for everything. That phrase was the sound of a closing cash register. I sat alone in my silent, empty house. Victor's picture was still on the mantelpiece, a reminder of a life that was supposed to be,
and a love that was supposed to last. My grief was now mixed with a bitter, simmering rage. Then came the first real, undeniable crack in the facade. My bank called me. "Mrs. Richter, we just want to confirm this payment on Victor's account. It was a substantial wire transfer, cleared through a Panamanian bank. It looks like an overdue payment on a very significant debt he held." "But Victor's account should be frozen," I explained, my heart suddenly pounding like a frantic drum. "He's deceased." "It's a joint account, Mrs. Richter, with his wife, Serena. She signed off on it. We only call for transfers over $100,000, which this was. It cleared yesterday." $100,000. Yesterday. Serena was supposed to be driving east, drowning in memories. Instead, she was emptying Victor's accounts and sending massive wires to an offshore bank. But why pay a debt if the debtor is dead? A dead man's debts often die with him or are dealt with through probate. Why the urgency and why the secrecy? I drove straight to the office of Mr. Weber, the lawyer who handled my husband's will and, ironically, Victor's. "Mr. Weber, I think my son is alive." I laid out the facts, the abrupt change of location, the missing watch, Serena's coldness, the hasty condo sale, and the $100,000 wire transfer after the funeral. Mr. Weber, a careful man who specialized in wills and estates, listened with an expression that slowly shifted from mild skepticism to focused concern. "Mrs. Richter, if Victor is truly alive, this is a colossal insurance fraud and a conspiracy to commit theft. Faking death to escape financial obligations is one thing. Faking death to clean out the assets and leave his mother holding the bag for the funeral is, well, it's monstrous." We agreed to hire a private investigator immediately, a discreet, relentless woman named Mia. I gave her the details of the Panamanian bank and the mysterious $100,000 payment. "Follow the money, Alara," Mia advised. "It's the only truth that never lies." Mia's work was quick and devastatingly efficient. Within a week, she had the full, sordid truth. The $100,000 was a final payment to a man named Vargas, a local fixer in Tulum who specialized in providing official-looking documents for a price. The death certificate, the dental records, the fingerprint matching, all fabricated. Victor hadn't been on a private fishing trip. He had spent 3 days in a cheap motel outside Cancun while Vargas secured his death. Then it took a flight to a tiny, obscure island in the South Pacific, a remote paradise that only the very wealthy or the very desperate could find. And Serena? She hadn't gone east. She had taken a different flight, same destination, 2 days after the wire transfer cleared. I remember standing in Mr. Weber's office, staring at the grainy satellite photos Mia had provided, Victor laughing on a white sand beach next to Serena, who was wearing a ridiculously large straw hat, and my diamond earrings. My son wasn't dead. He was free. Free from his debts, free from his responsibilities, free from the mother he used as an inexhaustible resource. He hadn't just faked his death to escape his creditors. He faked his death to escape me, the ultimate rejection, the ultimate declaration of my unimportance. I had been a burden, a problem to be solved, and his solution was to erase his own life. The mahogany coffin wasn't a tomb for Victor. It was a tomb for my sanity. I went home, but this time the house felt different. No longer filled with paralyzing grief. It was instead buzzing with a cold, electric fury. The woman I was died the day the police came to the door. The woman I became was standing in her place, calculating. I called Mr. Weber and Mia back. "We need to stop them," Mr. Weber insisted. "We call the police, we expose the fraud, and we have them arrested for insurance fraud and forgery." "No," I said, my voice steady, sounding alien to my own ears. "We won't do that. Not yet." Mia was surprised. "Alara, why not? This is a federal crime." "Because an arrest sends him to prison, Mia, but it doesn't give me justice. It turns him into a victim and me into the vengeful mother who ruined his life. He'll serve a few years and then he'll be back, still expecting me to forgive and rebuild. He will return a pauper, but a free one, and in his mind, I will still be his only safety net." I paused, looking at Victor's picture. He faked his death to escape me. He thought he was giving himself a new life, unburdened by debt, funded by my grief, leaving me with nothing but a checkbook and a dead man's bills. But he didn't realize that in faking his death, he gave me the ultimate weapon, the power to truly, permanently, and legally bury him. My plan was simple. It wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. It was about giving Victor the complete, unchangeable ending that he so meticulously planned for himself. I was going to bury him again, just not in the ground. I was going to perform a final, devastating legal and financial burial. First, the estate. Since Victor was legally dead, his half of the condo, paid for by me, was technically part of his estate, which Serena had hastily sold. But because the death was registered as happening in Mexico and he was married, the legal jurisdiction was messy. Mr. Weber and I moved fast. We filed a formal challenge to the estate sale, arguing that the death was a direct result of fraudulent activity by Serena, making the sale of the asset, which was primarily funded by me, null and void. We knew this would take years, but the purpose wasn't to win the condo back. The purpose was to freeze every bank account Serena hadn't drained and lock down any residual assets they still held. Second, the debts. The most cruel part of Victor's death was the mountain of co-signed and guaranteed debts he left me. Credit cards, business loans, the co-signed lease on the condo they abandoned. The total was over $300,000. These were debts I was legally obligated to pay unless the debtor was proven to be alive. I called every single creditor, everyone, and I told them, "My son, Victor Richter, is dead. Here is the death certificate and the police report. You need to write off these unsecured loans or transfer them to the next of kin, his widow, Serena Richter, who is now unreachable." I didn't pay the debts. I used his death to erase his financial history. I used the very lie he created to financially annihilate his past. The creditors, seeing an official death certificate, were legally obligated to settle the debts through the estate or write them off. They had no interest in pursuing a dead man's widow on an obscure island. Third, the annihilation. This was the part that was all mine, the part where I let Victor know that his new life was built on quicksand. Mia provided me with the specific island they were on, a place called Ile de la Réunion. She found the name of the local bank they would have used to receive the wire transfer.
I transferred a specific sum of money to a local lawyer on the island, just enough for a consultation. I instructed the lawyer to draft a single, perfectly legal document, a formal, legal notification of disinheritance. Since Victor was legally dead in our country, the document could be sent via certified mail to the island, addressed to Victor Richter, C.O. Serena Richter. It was a precautionary measure, making doubly sure that if he ever managed to make it back and overturn his death certificate, he would find absolutely nothing left to claim. But the final, crushing blow was personal. I wrote a letter. Not an angry letter, not a tearful one. A letter of pure, crystalline fact. My dearest Victor, I know you're alive. I have seen the photos of you on the beach. You look rested. Your plan was simple and in its own way elegant. You planned to be declared dead, erase your financial history, and leave your foolish mother to grieve and pay off the rest. You planned to have a funeral that emptied my accounts while you toasted your freedom with my diamond earrings. You thought you had escaped. You thought you had murdered the man you were and buried the mother who was the cause of all your trouble. And here's the beautiful irony, Victor. You are right. You are dead. The Victor Richter who was my son, the man who had a mother who loved him, an inheritance waiting for him, and a safety net beneath him, that man is truly and finally buried. I have used the death certificate you purchased to wipe out all your co-signed debts. You are no longer indebted to the banks, which I know was your primary goal. But in doing so, I have also wiped out your credit rating, your social security number, it is flagged as deceased, and any future claim to an American bank account. The condo sale? I've frozen the remaining capital pending a fraud investigation into your widow. And me? The burden you tried to escape? I'm free.
I sold my house and moved to a beautiful cottage on the coast. I have funded a scholarship in your name, Victor Richter, deceased, for young entrepreneurs who demonstrate integrity. I am keeping the mahogany coffin, Victor. It's a beautiful piece of furniture, a reminder of the day I buried my foolish love and found my strength. But here's the most important part, the real burial, Victor. I have disinherited you completely. If you ever try to resurface, if you ever try to prove you are alive to claim the money you abandoned, you will resurrect yourself as a 40-year-old man with zero credit, no assets, no mother, and a federal warrant for insurance fraud. You will emerge from your grave and find that the only thing waiting for you is handcuffs and poverty. You traded my love for a false identity and a few years of borrowed paradise. You thought you were free, but you are not. You are permanently, financially, legally dead. And you, Victor, are trapped in the grave you dug for yourself. Rest in peace. Ilara. I sent the letter, certified, to the island. I also sent a final, one-time wire transfer to the account Serena used for the $100,000 payment. It was a single, small payment. $500. A gesture, a mocking gift, a reminder of the last transfer he asked for that I hadn't sent. 2 weeks later, the final beautiful piece of evidence arrived. A letter, hand-delivered by a special courier all the way from the island. It was short, written on a crumpled piece of paper in Victor's unmistakable handwriting. You monster. You actually did it. You left me nothing. I'm stranded. You are truly the worst mother a man could have. I read it twice. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a profound, chilling sense of calm. He called me a monster. Good. He thought I was the worst mother. Excellent. Because the woman he thought I was, the foolish, enabling, money-dispensing mother, was the one he despised enough to bury. The monster, the woman who finally said no, was the one who survived. I took the crumpled letter, walked to my fireplace, and set it on fire. I watched the paper curl and turn to ash, and in those final burning moments, I knew that the burial was complete. The man, Victor, was now truly and permanently gone. I often think about the word escape. Victor faked his death to escape me, but he wasn't escaping me. He was escaping the consequences of his own choices. And in trying to escape, he did the one thing that truly freed us both. He freed me from the obligation of unconditional love. He showed me, with chilling clarity, that the relationship was not mother and son, but ATM and customer. And once the ATM was emptied, the connection was severed. My life now is quiet, peaceful, and mine. I travel with my friends. I take art classes. I have dinner on my porch, listening to the ocean, paid for with the money that should have been used to fund Victor's disastrous new life. I never heard from him again. The island is remote. Money is essential there. Without his assets, without his future claims, and with his identity flagged as legally deceased, he is trapped. He is a ghost. He is exactly what he planned to be, just a very poor ghost. He faked his death to gain freedom. I performed his final burial to gain mine. And for the first time in 40 years, I feel a peace that is not fragile, not dependent on someone else's happiness, but built on the solid bedrock of my own self-respect. The mahogany coffin sits in my garage. Sometimes I look at it and I smile. It's the most beautiful metaphor of freedom I have ever owned. I buried him anyway. Just not in the ground. I buried him in paperwork, debt, and finality. And that, my friends, is a burial you can never dig your way out of. If you enjoyed this story of justice and unexpected strength, please consider subscribing to the channel. Let me know what you would have done in the comments.